Let me ask you a question. A completely rhetorical question. What do Charles Darwin, Isaac Newton, and Albert Einstein all have in common? Each one of them was a genius in their field. Each one of them brought to us discoveries that were never thought of before. They thought outside of the box and created something that we had never seen from that direction, from that vantage point before. But here's the thing. None of those men, as exemplary as they are in their fields, actually discovered anything. Charles Darwin did not discover evolution. He simply identified and codified something that already existed. Isaac Newton didn't discover gravity. We weren't floating around in an abyss of an anti-gravity chamber before Isaac Newton came around. He just identified gravity. Albert Einstein didn't discover relativity. He identified that time is an illusion and it only changes on our perspectives. It's relative. All three of those men were geniuses. Yet none of them actually discovered anything. They identified something that existed. And that's an important point. In addition, all three of those men were considered to be on the autism spectrum. I believe that we are on the brink of a humanitarian leap in consciousness. And I believe that out-of-the-box thinkers, like Charles Darwin, like Isaac Newton, and like Albert Einstein, are the harbingers of change. They're the ones that are leading this consciousness new thought revolution. Much like the contemporaries that are thought to be on the autism spectrum, such as Steve Jobs, Jerry Seinfeld, Mark Zuckerberg. Just like Darwin, Newton, and Einstein, Jobs, Seinfeld, and Zuckerberg took something that already existed, took something that was very needed in the world, and identified it, brought it to the masses, created something out of nothing. And that's exactly the kind of out-of-the-box thinking that we need today. Today, 1 in 59 children are diagnosed with autism. And that number is growing. We're actually at what would be epidemic proportions. We could say that this is something that we should be concerned about, except I'm here to tell you that there's nothing to be concerned about. I don't consider autism a disease or a disability. It's just a different ability. It's an outside-the-box thinking that we actually need in this world today. When my daughter was diagnosed a few years ago, and I started learning more and more about autism, suddenly everything fell into place. My childhood made sense. My brother's childhood made sense. My daughter's childhood made sense. Her two brothers' childhood made sense. The dynamic in our society suddenly made sense. I don't call autism autism, I call it awesometism, because it makes sense for the world that we live in today. For exactly where we are today in our humanitarian evolution, in our consciousness, autism makes sense. And I believe that the next 10, 20, 50 years are going to look nothing like the last 10, 20, 50 years. And that could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. And that depends on what we are willing to do with it. Whether we're willing to be on the leading edge of that new thought or on the trailing edge of that new thought. And that all of our systems need to change. For me, I was lucky. I was born and raised to a mother who was a special education teacher, who, without knowing it, was raising me to think outside of the box, to think in ways that were not created anymore, that had never been seen in that way, that were not the traditional ways of thought. And I went to pursue a philosophy degree, and I went to go on into my world, pursuing both my career and my entrepreneurial side hustle, my side gig, what I call my sexier plan. And here's the thing that I learned along the way. Why the atypicals and the out-of-the-box thinkers are going to be the leaders of the future. Just like Charles Darwin, Isaac Newton, and Albert Einstein revolutionized the way we think, so today someone in this room is revolutionizing the way we think in their field. Do you think it might be you? Are you willing to step outside the box and think in a different way? Are you willing to create systems in the world so that those out-of-the-box thinkers are held, are encouraged, are brought to their genius levels? We need a shift in our mentality and in our systems, in every single system that we have. Education, corporate, communication. We need to have some shifts in those systems that are in place. So education comes first. 1 in 59 children are diagnosed with autism. That means that by 2025, we will have 500,000 adults entering into the workforce. What systems have we put in place today to prepare them for their genius? My daughter's lucky she is in what's called a community class. A class that is designed for sensory awareness, for retreat from the sensory overload of the rest of the school, with a specialized teacher that understands the behavioral shifts and changes that comes with this sort of mind, with the perception of a consciousness that works in a little bit of a different way than the neurotypicals. Wouldn't you all have loved to be in a class designed for you to learn? Wouldn't you all have liked a space to retreat from the noise and bustle of the school and the sensory overload? How many of you consider yourselves to be a highly sensitive person? HSPs, raise your hand. I knew you were HSPs because you're the ones nodding. The highly sensitive people are the ones who are coming in to rule the world. And we need to accommodate that. We need to make that celebrated. The next system that needs an overhaul is our corporate system. Our corporate system was developed, much like our educational system, to churn out workers during the Industrial Revolution. To churn out people who can adapt to the mold, who can come into the factory work 9 to 5, put out products, and get the paycheck at the end of the week. Our world doesn't work like that anymore. We are during the time and on the brink of a huge evolution in intelligence, artificial intelligence, consciousness. We're not meant to be factory mold workers. So our corporate systems need to reflect that, much like our educational systems need to. So in the corporate settings, like the high-tech sectors, they're actually creating jobs and environments that have sensory deprivation or sensory awareness rooms or locations. We need to encourage more of that in our corporate world. There are also quite a lot of high-tech sectors, high-tech companies that are now looking specifically to hire people that are on the autism spectrum. Because the benefits of hiring on the autism spectrum is that you have loyalty, you have very direct thinkers, you have people who are very willing to see things that other people might not see. So to codify in different vantage point. The last place that we need a complete system overhaul is in our communication. We've already seen with the rise of social media how our communication has been altered. We no longer have a communication that comes from top-down pyramid. We have a social structure for our communication these days. We don't have big boss telling people what to do. We have lots of companies that are looking to create an internal dialogue, to create a social selling, a social story. And this is where our communication, where we are going to take over as those highly sensitive people, because we are the storytellers. We're the ones who can relate on a human level. We're the ones who actually feel, they say that autism, that people on the autism spectrum lack empathy. I'm here to discount that, to argue that. I don't think autistic people lack empathy. I think they have too much empathy. They have excess empathy, and so therefore they have to guard it. They have to cushion it. They become very sensitive to it. So here we are in the communication world where the highly sensitive people, the autistic people, the outside-of-the-box thinkers, are now able to communicate within that social structure of social media, social telling. We have some work to do. We have our work ahead of us. We're on the brink of an evolutionary leap. And all of us have the opportunity to be on the leading edge of that evolutionary leap. Who's willing to take that step? Who's willing to think outside of the box? Who's willing to change some systems in their educational world, in their corporate world, in their communication world? Who is willing to be a different thinker? And who is willing to support those who think differently? And we might just create our own new theory of evolution. Thank you.